Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mastering English Podcast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Sam.
Today, we are opening up a topic that is, I think, simultaneously the most important skill in English and also maybe the most frustrating one.
Oh, definitely the most frustrating.
It's listening comprehension. And if you're an intermediate learner, you know this struggle. You know it intimately. You can read these complex articles, you can write emails, but the second a native speaker starts talking quickly, your brain just freezes. It feels like they're speaking at warp speed, and suddenly your whole system, your whole comprehension system just shuts down.
It's that moment of panic, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
when your internal simultaneous translator just kind of waves a white flag and says, nope, I quit.
I quit. Exactly. You're trying to decode each individual sound, and then you hit a phrase like, we need to hit the nail on the head, or something like, I'm going to run that idea by the boss.
Right.
And your brain is desperately translating hit the nail, literally. You're thinking about hammers. And by the time you realize it's not about carpentry, the speaker is like 5 topics ahead of you. That constant delay, that translation habit, is just terribly tiring. And it creates this huge cognitive block. And it really hinders your ability to move toward, genuine fluency.
It is a massive barrier. And it's because you're forcing your brain to do 2 incredibly difficult tasks at once. First, decoding a foreign language, and second, converting it to your native one. It's not efficient.
Not at all.
So our mission today is to give you the tools to bypass that delay. We want to move beyond simply hearing English to mastering what we call active listening.
Okay.
And we're going to get granular. We'll pinpoint the toughest parts of spoken English for B1 learners, things like connected speech, the specific rhythm of English, and of course, those sneaky non-literal idioms.
And the best part is we're offering specific, proven, actionable strategies. We really want you to stop translating in your head, to eliminate those misunderstandings, and just establish clear, confident communication.
Exactly.
So to get you hooked, here's where it gets really interesting. We're going to teach you a technique called shadowing that will, almost instantly help you pick up the rhythm and flow of English, especially that fast, blended speech that's so hard.
Plus, and this is my favorite part, we're going to do a deep dive into the secret MVP of the English language.
Oh, an MVP?
The schwa sound. It's the most common sound in English, but it's often the most ignored. And mastering it changes everything about how you sound and how you understand.
And yes, we have a quick pop quiz for you later on. It'll cover some specific new vocabulary that we're going to unpack in just a minute, so definitely stick around for that.
So if you're ready to stop letting those fast-talking native speakers win and, start actively participating in the conversation, this deep dive is absolutely for you.
But first, do us a quick favor. It just takes 2 seconds. Subscribe to Mastering English Podcast right now and give this a quick like. It genuinely helps us reach more incredible learners just like you all over the world.
We'd really appreciate it.
All right, so let's start by establishing the fundamental concept, the one we really need to master. Active listening. Most of us, and I'm including myself here, just think listening is, hearing things, right? Just letting sound in.
That's the core misconception we really have to dismantle first. Just hearing is passive. It's letting sound waves physically register in your ear canal. It's a biological process.
Okay.
Active listening, on the other hand, is highly intentional. It requires real cognitive effort. It's the practice of preparing your mind to receive information, observing not just the words, the verbal message, but also all the nonverbal cues the speaker is sending.
Like body language and tone of voice.
Exactly. And then, crucially, providing appropriate feedback to demonstrate that you were actually paying attention.
So it's listening to understand, not just waiting for your turn to talk. The intentionality part is a huge component we often miss.
Precisely. The overall goal of active listening, whether you're in a high-stakes business meeting or just chatting with a friend, is to eliminate misunderstanding and establish clear communication.
Right.
When you actively listen, you confirm to the speaker that their point is landing. And you, the listener, you absorb more content and you gain a deeper understanding because you're consciously and critically engaged.
I used to totally think listening was just letting the words wash over me until it's my turn to speak, and then I just try to remember the last thing they said. The idea that it's a practice that requires this massive intentionality it's a really big one.
It does require massive intentionality. And what's fascinating here is that this technique has some pretty profound historical roots way outside the world of language learning.
Oh.
Yeah, the term active listening was first coined by 2 famous humanistic psychologists, Carl Rogers and Richard Farson, way back in 1957.
1957. Wow. That is so much older than I expected. I always assumed it was like a modern business communication technique from the 80s or 90s.
Not at all. It was born in the world of therapeutic communication and counseling. Rogers emphasized three conditions that he believed were necessary for effective counseling: empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard.
Okay, so what was the original intent? How did active listening fit into that?
The original intent was to create a non-threatening, empathic environment, a space where the person speaking would feel completely heard and deeply understood without any judgment at all.
Wait, that's quite radical for 1957. Why was that so groundbreaking compared to what came before?
Well, before Rogers, many forms of therapy were rooted in the idea that the therapist was the authoritarian expert who just diagnosed your problem and told you how to fix it.
Right, the expert on the couch.
Exactly. Rogers's technique was revolutionary because it totally shifted the power dynamics. It was designed to overcome the client's defensiveness and promote personal growth simply by having the listener validate the speaker's experience.
So it was about creating change just by confirming, I see you, I hear you, and your perspective is valid.
Precisely. And that same principle is what makes it so essential for business, for education, and especially for cross-cultural negotiations today. It builds goodwill and trust almost instantly.
That's a great deep dive nugget. Now, back to the cognitive side of it. We talked about the brain processing something like 500 words per minute, but the average rate of speech is only around 125.
Right, a huge gap.
That's a 375 word per minute gap. So instead of letting our minds drift off and think about, what's for dinner, how do we actively use that extra mental bandwidth?
That processing gap is precisely why people tune out. There's just too much empty space. An active listener uses that spare capacity for internal strategies. One is mental paraphrasing.
Mental paraphrasing.
Yeah, you're quickly turning the speaker's last sentence into your own simplified words, but just inside your head. So the speaker says, I'm incredibly stressed about the potential for a supplier delay to impact our Q4 projections.
And I'd quickly think, problem with materials could affect sales.
Exactly. You can also use that bandwidth for prediction. You ask yourself, okay, based on what they just said about the parts being late, what are they likely to say next about the project deadline? This keeps the brain proactively engaged and stops the mind from wandering.
That reframes the spare time from a liability into a highly effective tool. Okay, this is great. Let's zoom in on the language itself now. It's time for our Stop and Unpack deep dive. We've got 4 core terms today, starting with one we've just been defining.
Let's do it.
So we keep saying active listening. I get the history and the mindset now, but what exactly does this noun phrase look like in practical real life?
Okay, so in plain English, active listening is the practice of paying full, undivided attention to grasp the speaker's entire message. That's both verbal and nonverbal, with the sole intent to understand, not just the intent to reply.
The intent to understand. I like that.
Let's break it down into 3 distinct scenarios.
Yeah.
First, a formal context. In high-stakes corporate negotiations, employing active listening is crucial for minimizing misunderstanding and fostering goodwill between competing firms.
Very professional.
Yeah.
And yeah, total necessary for success in that situation.
Now, a highly casual scenario. My friend was really upset and needed to vent about her day, so I made sure to use active listening to ensure she felt genuinely heard and validated, instead of me just trying to fix the problem immediately.
That's a powerful application. You're showing empathy just through pure attention. That's something we could all do more of.
I agree. And finally, here's a funny or weird one, just to illustrate the nonverbal side. When the cat explains why it insists on waking me up at 4 a.m. every single day, I use active listening, though I still don't get the why. I just observe the persistent meowing and the language of its tail.
Okay, dedicated nonverbal observation. That's commitment.
Now, let's try a quick role play. Let's demonstrate the lack of active listening and then call it out using our term.
Okay, sounds good. I'll tell you about a major issue I'm having with my new project timeline.
Go for it. I'm listening.
So the project is completely stalled because the supplier never sent the parts. I've called them 3 times, but they just keep routing me to different departments. And I'm genuinely stressed that we won't meet the deadline. I need to figure out what to do because...
Stalled, huh? Parts. That's tough. Say, did you remember to schedule that dentist appointment I mentioned yesterday? I really need to check my calendar.
Wait, stop. That is the classic shift response. You didn't acknowledge my deadline stress at all. You just immediately turned the conversation to your own agenda. You are absolutely not demonstrating active listening right now.
Guilty as charged. That immediate shift to my own topic is the exact opposite of validation.
So true.
When we discuss this concept, we often focus on the action verbs that go with it. These are the collocations. You practice active listening, you employ active listening to resolve a conflict, or you demonstrate active listening to show you're committed.
Okay, fantastic. Now let's move to the language mechanics that can break that active listening process. You mentioned connected speech earlier. That sounds like the key technical term for why native speakers sound like they skip or swallow words when they talk fast.
That is precisely it. Connected speech, it's a noun phrase, is the mandatory natural blending or linking of words in continuous fast speech. We don't say words in isolation, right?
Right.
We link them in a continuous stream of sound. And this phenomenon includes a few different things: linking sounds, reduced forms, assimilation, and elision.
So instead of carefully pronouncing, what do you want to do, word by word, the native speaker just smashes it all together. And what I hear is, what do you want to do?
Exactly. And this is probably the single biggest hurdle for B1 learners because the written word on the page doesn't match the spoken sound you hear in the wild.
It's a different language almost.
It can feel that way. Let's look at 3 examples. Formal first. The primary challenge for many ESL learners is grasping connected speech in fast-paced academic lectures, where reduced forms and assimilation can complicate meaning extraction.
It makes total sense. If you miss the links between the words, you miss the meaning of the whole sentence.
Now, for a casual example,
Yeah.
I realized the speaker said gonna instead of going to when we were discussing our weekend plans. Recognizing that specific reduced form is crucial for conversational fluency.
Okay.
And finally, a slightly technical, kind of funny example. If you don't recognize how linking works, the common phrase an ice cream can sound exactly like a nice cream. The ear adds an extra N sound where it shouldn't be because the N at the end of N links directly to the I at the start of ice and nice cream.
Wow, that's an even better example than the old ice cream for ice cream joke. The linking actually causes you to missegment the words in your brain.
Exactly. Let's try a quick skit to demonstrate the difference between articulated speech and connected speech. We'll focus on assimilation and linking with a slightly trickier phrase. Did you eat yet?
Okay, I'll say it slowly and carefully first.
Ready.
Did you eat yet?
Now, in fast speech, jichu yet.
Jichu yet. Okay, let's break down that phonetic transformation because it's so dramatic. That G sound at the beginning is completely new. Where does that come from?
That's a process called assimilation. The final id sound in did and the y sound at the beginning of you merge together. They create a brand new J sound. It's an unavoidable shortcut the mouth takes in rapid speech. Think also of the phrase handbag. Very often it assimilates to handbag because your tongue anticipates the B sound coming up and prepares for it early by making an M sound.
Okay, and what about the other one you mentioned, elision, where sounds just disappear entirely?
Elision is when a sound is dropped completely, usually a T or ed that's stuck between other consonants, just to simplify pronunciation. For example, next time often becomes next time. The tit just vanishes.
Like it was never there.
Or the T in just often disappears in a phrase like, I just want to say. This is why that shadowing technique we mentioned is so essential. You have to train your ear and your mouth to expect these changes.
So the key collocations, the key terms to know here are recognizing these specific processes. Assimilation, elision, linking sounds, and reduced forms. These are all part of grasping connected speech.
Absolutely. Understanding this is half the battle won.
Okay, that brings us back to the survival strategy. Avoiding panic and listening for the context instead of every single word. The source material calls this getting the gist. What does that crucial phrase mean exactly?
To get the gist, which functions as an idiom or a phrasal verb, means to understand the main idea, the core message, or the overall context of a conversation, even if you miss a significant chunk of the specific vocabulary or some of the minor supporting details.
So it's basically permission to relax. If I miss the details of a specific metaphor or some technical jargon, but I understand the conclusion of what they're saying, then I've still successfully communicated.
You've successfully navigated the communication attempt. For B1 learners, achieving, say, 70% comprehension and getting the gist is a massive win. That should be your primary goal.
Okay, I like that, a realistic goal.
Let's do 3 examples. Formal first. Even if you missed the complex terminology in the final economic forecast, the supervisors simply need you to get the gist of the presentation's core financial recommendation.
Right, focus on the high-level takeaway, not the jargon.
Casual next. I didn't catch all the details about where we need to meet or exactly what time the movie starts, but I got the gist. We're definitely meeting downtown on Friday night.
Perfect. You got the essential information.
And the funny application. I listened to my child's highly detailed 10-minute stories about their imaginary friend, just enough to get the gist that a magical unicorn was involved, and somehow the backyard needs cleaning.
The magical unicorn and the chore list, the essential plot points. That's all you need.
Let's role play this one. I'll tell you a somewhat meandering, complicated story about office politics. Your job is to interrupt me, summarize, and confirm you got the gist.
Okay, I accept the challenge. Make it complicated.
All right, so the merger was finally approved last week, but then the finance department realized that they had completely misinterpreted the quarterly revenue report from last May, which was based on an assumption about our overseas manufacturing capacity that turned out to be totally incorrect. So, because of that, they had to call an emergency meeting at 5 p.m. yesterday to reevaluate the entire structural budget for next year, and apparently someone forgot to hit send on the updated meeting minutes, which is why half the senior staff showed up completely unprepared this morning, and it was a disaster.
Whoa. Okay, stop right there. You've given me a massive amount of detail about reports and assumptions and meeting times. Let me see if I got the gist. The merger is proceeding, but it has caused significant internal chaos and major budget issues, all because of miscommunication and some incorrect data from the finance team.
Perfect. You completely ignored the specifics, the report from May, the 5 p.m. meeting, the senior staff's preparedness, and you just captured the core struggle and the unfortunate conclusion. You got the gist.
So the collocations are that we listen for the gist, we understand the gist, and we talk about the gist of the message. It gives us that necessary breathing room.
Absolutely. Now for our fourth and final term, which is probably the most culturally dependent challenge, idiomatic expressions.
Right. You mentioned raining cats and dogs before. The sources talk a lot about idiomatic expressions. Why are they so tricky for B1 learners who still rely on literal meaning?
Well, idiomatic expressions, it's a noun phrase, are phrases whose collective meaning simply cannot be derived by adding up the meanings of the individual words.
Okay.
They rely heavily on figurative, non-literal meaning and are deeply rooted in cultural context. They're often described as indivisible units because if you change just one word, the meaning usually collapses entirely.
They truly break all the rules of conventional vocabulary acquisition.
They do, which is why literal translation fails every single time. Let's do 3 examples. Formal. The frequent use of niche idiomatic expressions often complicates intercultural dialogue, making it difficult to maintain listening comprehension without prior cultural exposure.
Right, you need the secret cultural key.
Casual. When my colleague said, "I need to bite the bullet," I didn't worry about her teeth. I correctly understood the idiomatic expression to mean she needed to endure a difficult, unavoidable situation.
Good, you had the key for that one.
And the confusing one. I once heard a politician say they were going to put a pin in that. And I imagined them physically stabbing a bulletin board with a pin, which was completely useless for understanding that they just meant they were going to pause the discussion and come back to it later.
The loss of cultural context is total. The mental image is just completely wrong.
Huh?
Let's demonstrate one in a quick skit. I'll use a common idiom, and you react to the literal incorrect meaning.
Okay, lay it on me.
I was really nervous about presenting the complex data to the client, but I went in there and I told them exactly what needed to happen. I really felt like I hit the nail on the head with that feedback.
Wait, you used a hammer. Are you saying you brought carpentry tools into the meeting and physically struck something? That sounds incredibly aggressive and probably inappropriate for a client meeting.
No. When I say I hit the nail on the head, that idiomatic expression means I identified the problem perfectly, or I said something that was exactly correct and relevant. It's a metaphor for precision and accuracy.
Ah, okay. That makes much more sense. Much better than fighting with hardware.
Definitely.
So when we deal with idioms, we typically use verbs like you acquire idioms, meaning you learn them systematically, you learn to use idioms appropriately, and you work hard to comprehend idioms when you're listening.
That vocabulary deep dive was extremely helpful. So now we know the terms. Let's pivot back to the internal barriers, the psychological challenges that stop learners from successfully progressing.
Right. We've established that listening takes massive amounts of effort, which is why the first psychological barrier is mental fatigue and tuning out. The heavy cognitive load that's required to decode foreign speech leads to students just deciding it's too hard, and they simply tune out or give up halfway through a conversation.
That feeling of deflation, where you just mentally throw up your hands and go, nope, I'm done.
Exactly. The key remedy here is to lose the fear of asking for help. You have to normalize asking native speakers to slow down, to repeat something, or to rephrase it.
That's hard for people, though. They feel embarrassed.
It is, but the sources note that native speakers are usually very understanding and highly willing to help, provided you communicate your need clearly. Don't just stare blankly. Use those active listening steps. Ask a clarifying question.
Okay, good advice. Now for the second, and maybe the most destructive challenge, that nasty habit of translating in your head.
This is truly the fluency killer. It's so terribly tiring because your brain is trying to handle the input, which is English, and simultaneously generate the output, which is your native language interpretation.
It's double the work.
It's double the work. And this constant pausing and context switching hinders fluency dramatically. We have to shift the mindset. You are learning to think in English, not training to become a professional simultaneous translator.
So the key here is not being an interpreter for yourself, but learning to operate natively within the English system, even if it means I have to simplify my thoughts at first.
Spot on. Now, challenge number 3 is what we call the Goldilocks problem, selecting inappropriate material.
The Goldilocks problem.
Yeah, not too hard, not too easy. Highly motivated students often choose material that is way too challenging for their B1 level. They want to watch the latest complex, fast-paced TV drama, but they end up defeating themselves because the cognitive load is just too high.
Right. It's like trying to watch a 3-hour documentary on quantum physics when you only understand common greetings. You're setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. They bite off way more than they can chew. The solution is crucial. You have to steer yourself toward appropriate, level-based content. Start with clear, neutral English, and approach the listening process in controlled steps.
How so?
Start by watching things with English subtitles, then gradually remove them. A short, intensely focused 5-minute exercise where you maximize your attention is far superior to a long 1-hour session where you risk getting lost and just tuning out.
And that leads directly to challenge 4, over-focusing on every single word.
We covered this with the concept of getting the gist. You have to set realistic expectations for yourself. It is neither necessary nor, frankly, possible to understand every single word all the time.
Even for native speakers.
Even for native speakers, the natural progression is this. First, you learn to get the gist. Second, you start to pick up more of the key details. And only then, over time, do you reach near total understanding.
Okay, that's a much healthier way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Before we move on to strategies, let's briefly note the non-psychological barriers. The source mentioned environmental barriers.
Right, like background noises, bad cell phone reception, or a speaker using really bombastic vocabulary.
And physiological barriers like having a headache or just feeling tired.
Correct. And again, the most interesting physiological boundary is that processing gap we talked about. The brain can process 500 words per minute, but speech is only 125.
Mm-hmm.
We have to use active strategies like that mental paraphrasing we discussed to bridge that gap and prevent the mind from wandering off.
Okay, let's talk about sound itself. This is where we get really technical, but it's so important. English is often described as a stressed language, which is the opposite of syllabic languages like Spanish or Japanese.
Correct. In a syllabic language, every syllable is pronounced with roughly equal weight and duration. But in English, certain words or syllables within words receive emphasis, that's the stress, and the others are weakened and shortened.
The classic robot voice. If you pronounce every syllable equally in English, you sound like a robot.
Yes, exactly. And the stress placement is crucial because it often changes the meaning of the word or even its part of speech. The classic illustration is the difference between the noun and the verb form of the word rebe.
Okay.
The noun, rebel, the person who fights against authority, stresses the first syllable. The verb rebel, the action of fighting back, stresses the second. Missing that one sound difference can fundamentally change your understanding of a sentence.
Which brings us to the most frequently used sound in all of English, the schwa.
Ah, the schwa, that upside-down E symbol you see in dictionaries. The schwa is the weak, central, unstressed vowel sound. It's that quick, almost lazy sound we make when we aren't emphasizing a syllable.
So it's literally the sound of the syllables we deliberately don't focus on. And that allows the stressed syllables to pop out more clearly.
Precisely. If we look at the word memory, the first syllable, mem, is stressed. The middle syllable, o, is reduced to the schwa sound. It's not memory, it's memory.
Right. A learner whose native language is syllabic often tries to pronounce memory with 3 full equal syllables, which immediately sounds slow and unnatural.
But if they train their ear to hear the schwa, they start to recognize the natural rhythm of English. Mastering where to use and hear the schwa is essential because it is the mechanism that makes English speech fluid, fast, and natural.
So by reducing those unstressed vowels to the schwa, native speakers save energy and time, and that's what creates that distinctive rhythm.
That's it.
What about those silent letters and linking again? Can you give us some new examples?
Silent letters are huge barriers. You have to explicitly learn to ignore the D in Wednesday, the G in foreign, the L in talk, or the B in doubt. Your brain sees the letter and wants to say it, but you can't. And remember, elision where sounds drop out. Think of the word laboratory. In fast American speech, the second A is often elided, making it sound more like laboratory.
Laboratory, right.
Or, I don't know, very often loses the T in don't, and it all merges together into, I don't know.
Final point on nuance before we get to strategies. Intonation. I need to make sure my intonation, the music of my voice, is conveying my intent correctly.
Intonation, the rise and fall of our pitch, is how we convey emotion and attitude. If I say, that was fantastic, with a high falling pitch, I'm expressing genuine enthusiasm.
But if you say it with a low rising pitch,
Yeah.
that was fantastic.
Right, then I might be expressing sarcasm or disbelief. It's the same words, but a completely different meaning. In question tags, it's really important. If I say, you know the answer, don't you? With a falling intonation at the end, I'm conveying certainty. It's an observation I'm just expecting you to confirm.
But if you say, you know the answer, don't you? With a rising intonation.
Then I'm genuinely checking for information. I'm expressing uncertainty. Learners have to listen for this subtle shift in pitch to correctly interpret the speaker's attitude.
Okay, we know the problems. We know the science behind the sounds. Let's talk about the tools that will help you win. Walk us through those 3 essential response steps for active listening that eliminate confusion.
These 3 response steps are the core technique. This is how you respond to show you understood and to clarify any doubts. Step 1 is paraphrase.
Okay, so I explained what they just said, but in my own words. So what I'm hearing is...
Correct. Step 2, clarify. Ask questions to ensure your understanding is accurate and complete. For instance, can you explain a little more about your motivation for that decision?
And finally, step 3 is summarize.
Right. You offer a concise overview of what you believe the main points and the intent of their message were. This is the final check before you conclude the topic. And remember, while you're doing all this, you have to refrain from judgment and observe the speaker's nonverbal content.
Now for the practical, accessible strategies. Let's start with strategy 1, shadowing and subtitles.
Shadowing is an incredibly powerful motor-based technique. You listen to a speaker, often through audio design for learners, which is generally a bit slower and clearer, and you repeat immediately after them, almost like an echo.
Okay.
You're focused less on the meaning at first and more on matching their rhythm, their stress, and most importantly, their connected speech.
But I have to ask the critical question here. If I'm just repeating sounds without focusing on the meaning, isn't that just parrot learning? How does that actually help with comprehension?
That's a vital question. It's not just parrot learning, because the goal of shadowing is to externalize those complex phonetic changes. By physically mimicking the sound flow, you are training your mouth and your ear at the same time to handle the pace.
So it's muscle memory.
It's muscle memory for your mouth and your ears. This physical training helps your brain encode the patterns of connected speech and the schwa sound as native patterns. It makes the decoding process automatic and much faster later on. You're training the system to operate in English, bypassing that need for translation.
So it accelerates the physical process of matching the written word to the spoken word.
Exactly. And alongside this, the strategy of watching content with English subtitles first and then gradually removing them is a really effective way to build confidence and map the spoken word to the written word without constant panic.
Okay, strategy 2 is the specialized game changer, the dictogloss activity.
Yes. Dictogloss, introduced by a linguist named Ruth Washribe, is an excellent technique. It's specifically designed to enhance listening, writing, and grammar structures all at once.
Okay, so how does it work?
It works in 4 distinct steps. Step 1 is warm-up. You introduce the relevant, complex vocabulary beforehand to reduce the cognitive load during the main task. Step 2 is dictation. The instructor reads a short text aloud twice at a normal, natural speed. While they're reading, students only take notes. Just the keywords, anchor points, and key pieces of information.
Why is just taking notes better than trying to write the whole thing down?
Because if you try to transcribe every word at normal speed, you will inevitably fall behind and miss the next words, which defeats the whole purpose. By focusing only on anchor words, you're immediately engaging with the gist of the text, which reinforces that crucial skill and forces your memory to work harder.
I see.
Step 3 is reconstruction. Students then work collaboratively in small groups to rebuild the text. They combine their notes and focus on producing a grammatically correct version using the target structures from the lesson.
The group work is key there. It reduces the individual pressure and encourages peer correction.
It's highly collaborative. And finally, step 4 is analysis and correction. The groups compare their reconstructed text with the original source text. And the focus here is on analyzing the grammar structures and key points they missed or misinterpreted. It integrates all 4 skills: listening, reading, writing, and even speaking about the language itself.
That sounds fantastic for focusing attention. Now, strategy 3, conquering idioms in context.
Right. Idioms are tough because they are so often culture-specific. The sources are very clear that they should be taught through integrated skill activities, not just by memorizing lists.
You have to see them in action.
You have to integrate speaking, reading, or role-playing. Some specific activities that are proven to be effective include matching the idiom to its meaning, sharing personal examples using an idiom, and role-playing scenarios.
Okay.
And a crucial criteria confirmed by 100% of the surveyed lecturers in the source material is that the idioms you choose to learn must be fitting for your language level. Start with the common ones first and build your confidence.
Okay, that was a huge amount of information on strategy. Before we wrap up with our pop quiz, let's do a quick common mistake segment. I know I shouldn't try to translate "I have 20 years" literally from my language, but what about a common grammar mistake that everyone, even advanced students, still makes in English?
That literal translation, "I have 20 years," is a classic. But the grammar mistake that consistently crops up, which is absolutely critical because it's a global error that affects overall comprehensibility, is subject-verb agreement, or SVA, in the present tense.
SVA, you mean errors like she have, he don't, or misusing plurals?
Exactly. Errors like she have or people doesn't. Native speakers would always gently correct that. It should be she has, he does not. And because the word people is a plural noun, we say people do not or people don't.
Right.
The present simple SVA rule is simple on paper, but it's often missed in the heat of rapid speech.
And it's a mistake that is repeated so often that it becomes an entrenched bad habit. It's really hard to fix later on.
Exactly. And when these mistakes become firmly entrenched, they are very difficult to correct. The philosophy of correction here is important. Correction should be limited. It should be focused on global errors like SVA. And students must learn to listen to themselves to fix these patterns as soon as possible, rather than having every minor error corrected.
Makes sense.
All right. We promised a quiz to test the absorption of today's deep dive. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Question 1. If a conversation is too difficult and fast, what skill should you practice to understand the main points? Getting the details or getting the gist?
That's our permission to relax phrase. You should definitely be focusing on getting the gist.
Correct. It means understanding the main idea. Question 2. Is the word memory containing the mysterious sound that makes English sound fluid? The schwa or the schwa?
It's the schwa sound, which is that unstressed in the middle of mem. Huh.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And finally, question 3. When you are actively listening, are you mainly listening to respond or are you mainly listening to understand?
If it's truly active listening, you are listening with a specific intent to understand the other person fully.
Excellent work. You passed the test.
That was a tremendous tour through sound science, the psychology of learning, and practical, actionable strategies. To quickly summarize the 3 most important concepts we tackled today that will change your listening practice: active listening, to get the gist, and connected speech.
If you can integrate those 3 concepts into your daily English practice, you will see rapid improvement. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. While we talked about correcting mistakes, remember that learning is all about taking risks and making mistakes.
Right. Fluency over initial paralyzing accuracy.
Precisely. The ultimate goal is fluency and effective communication. Remember, one study noted that correcting every single error, focusing only on the incorrect language, often discourages students from taking those essential risks. It makes them afraid to speak up in class unless they know their speech is perfect.
That's so true.
Don't let the fear of making a mistake stop you from using English actively. Consider how a teacher's feedback affects you emotionally, and always choose communication over perfection.
That is the perfect mentality to take forward. And here is your micro challenge for the week. Try to use the phrase, "I got the gist," with someone in English today, maybe after a long explanation from a native speaker, and tell us how it went in the comments below.
Now go forth and listen actively.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to Mastering English Podcast. I'm Alex. See you next time.